The storm rolled over the mesa like a beast with 1,000 growls. Thunder clawed the sky, lightning cut through the clouds, and the rain came down in knives. In the heart of it all, the small town of Dustfall flickered under the dim light of its oil lamps, every window glowing faintly yellow like eyes that refused to close. Inside the Dustfall Inn, a single woman sat by the hearth, her dark hat resting beside a half-empty whiskey glass. Evelyn Marrow, 30 years old, carried the kind of silence that made men shift in their seats. She wore a weathered leather coat and boots that had crossed more miles than most men dared to dream. A scar curved under her chin, faint but visible under the flicker of the firelight, a mark of a story no one knew yet. The piano in the corner had gone quiet hours ago. Only the ticking of the wall clock and the hiss of the storm outside filled the air. Evelyn's eyes stayed fixed on the door. She wasn't waiting for a friend. She was waiting for a ghost. The door burst open with the wind, slamming against the wall. A man stepped in, tall, broad, his shirt soaked through, hair slicked to his face. His boots hit the wooden floor with a heavy rhythm, one that made the barkeep glance up in wary recognition. Evelyn's hand slid toward the holster at her hip. "Evenin'," the man said, his voice low and tired, but steady. He pulled off his hat, water dripping onto the floor. "Storm's killing the trail out there." "Sit," Evelyn said, her voice calm as steel. "You'll need it." He hesitated, eyes narrowing. "You know me?" "I know your boots," she replied without looking away. "Worn on the left heel, burned at the right toe. Same pair that walked away from Raven Creek 3 years ago." The man's jaw tightened. "Then you know more than you should." The barkeep sensed the tension and quietly slipped into the back room. Leaving them alone with the stormed out, Evelyn stood slowly, her whiskey still in hand. "You were supposed to be dead, Holly Mercer." He chuckled under his breath. "So were you, last I heard." Their eyes met, fire and thunder colliding. There was history there, deep and cracked like the desert floor after rain. Not love exactly, but something heavier. Something that had been buried under guilt and unfinished words. She stepped closer, the firelight drawing gold into her brown eyes. "I buried a man in Raven Creek. His face looked a lot like yours." "And I buried a woman with your name on her wanted poster," Holly replied. "Guess neither of us finished what we started." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm softened outside, leaving only the soft patter against the windows. Evelyn placed her whiskey on the table and stepped within inches of him. The heat between them wasn't from the fire, it was from 3 years of running, chasing, and never forgetting. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. "I didn't," he murmured. "The dessert brought me." Her breath trembled, caught between anger and something more dangerous. When she moved closer, her lips barely brushed his, rough, trembling, uncertain. But then she bit his lip, hard enough to taste the copper tang of blood. He didn't flinch. He smiled, slow and dark. "I want more bits," he said, voice low like gravel rolling through whiskey. Her eyes flashed. "You always did." And then the thunder cracked again, this time not from the sky, but from outside the inn. Gunfire. 2 shots echoed through the night. Evelyn's eyes darted to the window, and Holly turned sharply toward the door. "Who the hell followed you?" she hissed. He looked at her, rain dripping from his jawline, eyes cold. "You're a skin the wrong man, Eve. Maybe it's you they came for." The lamps flickered. The door creaked again. Through the thin glass window, a shadow moved, tall, wide-brimmed hat, carrying a rifle with a silver barrel. Evelyn's hand dropped to her gun as the figure paused under the lightning. She froze. Because she knew that face. The man standing outside in the storm was supposed to be dead. And she was the one who had shot him. The rain had turned to silver needles, striking the window panes like desperate fingers. Evelyn's hand hovered near her revolver, her heart beat louder than the thunder. Holly moved to the corner of the inn, back to the wall, his eyes scanning the door with a gunslinger's calm. Outside, the figure didn't move. He stood in the lightning's glow, tall, powerful, and silent. His long black hair clung to his bare shoulders, braided with feathers and bone beads that gleamed under the stormlight. Across his chest hung tribal markings, white paint smeared with rain. In his hands, a rifle etched with Apache symbols. Evelyn's voice broke the silence. "That can't be him. I shot him in the heart." Holly didn't look away from the window. "Then either your aim's gone bad, or you're looking at a ghost." The door creaked as the wind forced it open again. The Apache warrior stepped inside, slow, deliberate, his boots silent on the wet floorboards. His eyes were black as the desert night, calm but burning with memory. "Evelyn Marrow," he said, his accent thick but his tone steady. "The desert carried your name to me." Evelyn's grip tightened on her revolver. "And what did it tell you?" "That you left a man bleeding by the canyon's edge," the warrior replied, "and that his spirit does not rest." Hale's hand dropped to his gun, but the warrior's gaze flicked to him with the precision of a blade. "Put it down, white man. You carry no part in this story." Evelyn stepped forward. "He's got more part in it than you think." Holly Mercer was there that night, too. The Apache's eyes narrowed. "Then you both have sins to bury." For a long moment, the fire hissed between them, wood crackling under the weight of ghosts. Evelyn's memories clawed at her, the gunshot, the fall, the sound of her own breathing while a man's blood darkened the sand. She had told herself it was justice. But looking at the warrior now, she wasn't sure. "What do you want?" She whispered. The Apache tilted his head, water dripping from his braids. "To finish what the desert began." Before Holly could move, the warrior lifted his rifle and fired, the bullet missing Hale's head by an inch, shattering a whiskey bottle on the shelf behind him. Evelyn's reflexes flared. She drew her gun, fired once. The bullet hit the warrior's shoulder, spinning him slightly, but he didn't fall. He just stood there, staring at her, blood mixing with the rain on his skin. "You still aim true," he said, voice steady despite the wound. "But you never learn to see." The barkeep, trembling from the back room, shouted, "No more killing in my place." But none of them listened. Evelyn's gun hand trembled. "Why are you alive?" "I saw you fall into the canyon." The warrior smiled faintly, not cruelly, but like a man who'd seen too much. "The desert took me, but it gave me back. It said there was unfinished blood between us." Holly muttered, "Hell, Eve. This ain't about just shooting a man, is it?" She didn't answer, because deep down she knew the truth. The Apache she had shot wasn't her enemy. He had been protecting someone else. She had fired out of fear, not justice. And that mistake had haunted her every night since. The warrior stepped closer, hand pressed to his wound, eyes never leaving hers. "You remember the woman crying that night? The one you didn't see when you pulled the trigger?" Evelyn froze. "She was my wife," he said quietly. "And she died searching for me." Her breath shattered. "I didn't know." "You didn't care," he replied softly. The silence was unbearable. Even Holly lowered his gun now, staring between them like a man caught between the living and the dead. Then the warrior leaned closer, voice low and filled with meaning. "The desert remembers everything, Evelyn Marrow, even the sins you bury." He turned and walked toward the door, leaving a trail of blood and rain behind him. But before stepping into the storm again, he said, "When the moon rises over Raven Creek again, come alone." And then he was gone, swallowed by lightning and the howl of the wind. Evelyn stood frozen, her gun hanging useless at her side. Holly whispered, "You ain't really thinking of going, are you?" She didn't answer. Her reflection in the window looked pale, ghostly, like the storm itself had claimed her. Outside, thunder rumbled over the desert, rolling like the echo of old sins refusing to die. The next morning came heavy and gray, as if the storm had wrung the color out of the world. Dustfall was silent except for the creak of signs swaying in the leftover wind. Evelyn Marrow sat at the edge of her bed inside the inn, her revolver laid out beside her, cleaned and loaded. The band of her hat cast a shadow across her eyes as she stared at the wall, not seeing it. But what lay beyond it? Raven Creek. She could still hear the Apache's voice, deep, calm, carrying the weight of the desert. When the moon rises over Raven Creek again, come alone. The words had settled into her bones like frost. Holly Mercer stood by the window, rolling a cigarette with rough fingers. "You really gonna ride out there?" he asked, the tone between disbelief and admiration. Evelyn didn't answer at first. She strapped her holster around her hip, the sound of leather tight against the silence. "He's alive, Holly. That means everything I told myself about that night was a lie." "Or maybe he's some kind of trick," Holly muttered. "Apache folk got stories. Spirits that walk after dark, men who die but don't die. You can't tell what's real in that desert." Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes tired but fierce. "I need to see what's real." Holly sighed and flicked the match. "Then I'm coming with you." "No," she said sharply. "He told me to come alone." He smirked faintly, the smoke curling around his face. "And since when do you listen to orders?" Evelyn paused, the silence between them heavy with all the things left unsaid. Then she simply said, "Since last night." She left before sunrise. The desert stretched before her like a wounded beast, raw and endless. Her horse, a dark mare named Ash, carried her over ridges of red stone and through dried riverbeds still slick from the rain. The air smelled of sage and lightning. Ravens followed her at a distance, black wings glinting against the rising sun. By noon, the heat shimmered over the sand. She stopped near a rusted water trough beside an abandoned homestead. A single windmill creaked, turning lazily. She let Ash drink and took a sip from her canteen, staring at the horizon. That was when she saw him. The Apache warrior stood on the ridge, motionless, watching her. The wind tugged at his long black hair, the sunlight catching the white paint across his chest. His wound from the night before was bound with animal hide, yet he stood tall, like the land itself had healed him. Evelyn's hand drifted to her revolver, but she didn't draw. "You said to come alone," she called. "So I did." He began to walk down the slope toward her, every step deliberate, the sand whispering beneath his feet. "You kept your word," he said when he reached her. "That's more than most do." "I came for answers," she said. "Not forgiveness." "Forgiveness is not mine to give," he replied. "But the desert listens. It remembers truth." Evelyn studied him, her eyes tracing the symbols painted on his arms. "Tell me your name." The warrior's gaze softened for the first time. Tarak. The name lingered between them, powerful and old, like thunder carved into stone. Evelyn looked down. "You said your wife died that night." "She did," Tarak said quietly. "You shot me and she ran to me. When I fell, she tried to stop the bleeding. The white soldiers came after. They didn't spare her." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "I didn't know they were coming. I thought you were one of them." Tarak stepped closer until only a breath separated them. "And now? What do you think I am?" She looked up into his eyes, deep, endless, reflecting both pain and peace. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe the only thing I ever got wrong." The wind shifted then, carrying the low hum of distant drums, faint, haunting. Tarak turned toward the horizon where the canyon opened in red light. "Raven Creek waits," he said, "if you have the courage to remember what you buried." Evelyn mounted Ash, her heart pounding. "Then lead the way." Tarak began walking ahead, barefoot over the hot sand. Ravens circled above, their cries echoing across the desert. Behind them, the clouds gathered again, the storm rebuilding itself. As if the earth was preparing for something it had waited years to finish. As they rode toward Raven Creek, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was being led not into danger, but into truth. And sometimes, she thought, truth is the deadliest thing of all. The sun had begun to sink behind the canyon walls by the time Evelyn Marrow and Tarak reached the edge of Raven Creek. The light turned the red stones to blood, and the air carried that dry, metallic smell that follows a storm. Evelyn dismounted her horse, her boots crunching over the sand and broken shale. Every step echoed like memory. "This is where it happened," she said quietly. Tarak nodded once, his sharp profile lit by the fading sun. "The creek ran high that night," he said. "The sky was black. You rode in with soldiers behind you." Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she brushed the dust from her holster. "I remember the shouting, the torches, the screams." She looked around. The place was nothing now but silence and ghosts. The creek bed had dried to a thread of silver. "They said your people were ambushing travelers." "They said many lies," Tarak replied, voice low. "But lies travel faster than truth, and they bring more guns." He walked ahead, and Evelyn followed. The air grew heavy as they reached a hollow in the rocks. Tarak knelt and brushed away the sand, revealing a small bundle wrapped in animal hide, bones, white and fragile, tied with red thread. He touched it with reverence. "My wife," he said softly. "I buried what was left when I came back." Evelyn felt her heart splinter. She went down on one knee beside him, staring at the small grave. "I was 27, she said, her voice raw. "I just joined the marshals. They told me the Apaches had stolen from a convoy. They said shoot first if they resist. I never asked why." Tarak didn't look at her. "And now you do." She nodded slowly. "Every night since." For a long moment, the canyon was silent except for the wind sighing through the stone. Then Tarak rose, his tall frame casting a shadow across her face. "You said Holly Mercer was there," he said. "Why?" Evelyn looked away. "Because it was his convoy. He was working the line for the army, guiding shipments through Apache land. He swore it was safe. I trusted him." Tarak's eyes darkened. "So it was Hale's guns that killed my people." Evelyn didn't answer, but her silence was enough. The warrior stepped closer, his muscles tense, his jaw hard. "He sent you. He used you to spill blood on land that wasn't yours." She met his gaze, trembling but steady. "If that's true, then he played both of us." Tarak looked out across the desert, his expression unreadable. "The desert remembers betrayal, Evelyn Marrow. It buries it in sand, but never forgets." Evelyn rose, brushing the dust from her knees. "Then maybe it's time it saw justice." A shadow moved along the ridge above them, a flicker of movement against the dying light. Tarak saw it first, his hand going to the knife strapped at his side. Evelyn turned just as a gunshot cracked the silence. The bullet hit the rock near her boot, spraying dust. Another shot followed, closer this time. "Stay low," she shouted, drawing her revolver and crouching behind a boulder. Tarak crouched beside her, eyes sharp, scanning the ridges. "He followed you," he said. "The white man." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Halle, more gunfire rained down, precise, practiced. She knew that rhythm. She'd ridden beside it once. "Damn it," she hissed. "He must have left dustfall right after me." Tarak loaded his rifle calmly. "Then we ended here." Evelyn fired back, the blast echoing through the canyon. Dust and smoke rose around them. Tarak moved like a shadow, swift, silent, controlled. He climbed the rock face with the agility of a mountain cat. Evelyn covered him, firing when she saw Hale's muzzle flash. Minutes passed like hours. Then silence again. Thick and sharp. Evelyn crept out from behind the rock. Tarak? No answer. Only the slow drip of water somewhere deep in the canyon. Then a voice. Low, strained. Eve. Stop. She turned toward it. Hale stood on the ridge, bleeding from his side, his gun trembling in his hand. He ain't what you think, Hale rasped. That Apache, he ain't no victim. Evelyn kept her revolver raised. You lied to me, Hale. You lied about Raven Creek. He grinned weakly. Maybe, but so did he. Tarak appeared behind Hale, silent as the wind, knife drawn. His eyes burned with fire and loss. Hale turned, gasping. And before Evelyn could speak, the two men collided in a brutal struggle. The sun disappeared completely behind the ridge, and the canyon filled with darkness, thunder, and the sound of blood and truth colliding at last. The wind roared down Raven Creek like a wounded beast, carrying with it the echo of things long buried. Tarak stood motionless, the last light of the sun catching the white paint streaked across his chest, his body like carved stone, every muscle coiled, ready for the reckoning he'd known would come. Evelyn Marrow felt the chill of something more than the dusk as she rose slowly, her revolver still loose in her grip. Hale Mercer stepped out from the ridge, his long coat snapping behind him, eyes sharp and cold as river ice. You should have stayed gone, Apache, he said, leveling his rifle. There's a price on your head and a debt on mine. Tarak's gaze didn't waver. You speak of debt, Mercer? You took what wasn't yours. You burned our village, called it justice. You remember the children by the stream? A flicker crossed Hale's face, brief, human, but it was gone in a blink. That was war, he said, steady. We did what we had to. Evelyn's breath caught. She'd heard tales about the Raven Creek massacre, how an entire Apache band vanished in smoke and fire. She hadn't believed it had been Hale, not until now. Tarak took a step forward. War doesn't make murder clean. His voice was low, thunder behind it. And you killed my brother that day? Hale's hand trembled slightly, the rifle lowering just a fraction. Your brother led the raid on Silver Ridge. He slaughtered miners. No, Tarak cut in, his voice sharp as flint. My brother was there to stop them from poisoning our river. You hung him before the truth could breathe. The silence between them was electric, charged with old ghosts. Evelyn's heart pounded. She could see the storm breaking in both men's eyes, one of revenge, one of guilt, and she knew there would be no walking away clean. Suddenly Hale's rifle flashed. The crack shattered the canyon. Evelyn screamed, but Tarak had already moved. The bullet tore a path past his ribs, grazing him, blood blooming across his skin. In one swift motion, he hurled his knife. It struck Hale's shoulder, sending him sprawling to the dirt. Evelyn ran forward, trying to stop them both, but Tarak was already upon him, pinning Hale with a snarl that came from deep in his soul. Look around you. Tarak shouted, pressing Hale's face into the red dust. Every grain here remembers what you did. Hale coughed, spitting blood. You think killing me will bring them back? Tarak froze. The weight of the knife in his hand felt heavier than any weapon should. The wind howled again, sweeping through the canyon like a mourning cry. He looked to the grave mound behind him, small, marked only with a carved feather. No, Tarak said quietly. But maybe it'll stop this from happening again. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice steady, trembling only slightly. Tarak, you can't let hate be your master. That's what men like him count on. Her words hit something inside him. For a moment, he saw his brother's face, the laughter, the firelight, the songs they sang before everything turned to smoke. Tarak closed his eyes. He released Hale, who gasped for breath, clutching his bleeding shoulder. You'll live, Tarak said, and you'll tell the truth about what happened here. Holly stared up at him, disbelief mixing with shame. "You're letting me walk?" Tarak rose slowly, his shadow long and powerful in the fading light. "No one walks away from truth. It follows you like a ghost." Evelyn watched as Holly stumbled to his feet, fear and respect tangled in his eyes. Then he turned and vanished into the darkening canyon. Tarak looked at Evelyn, blood running down his side, his breath heavy but steady. "You shouldn't have stayed," he murmured. "I couldn't leave," she said softly. "Some things are worth standing beside, even if they burn." The two stood there as night fell, the stars beginning to shimmer above the red cliffs. In that silence, something shifted, an old wound beginning to close. If only by a thread. Tarak raised his head toward the sky, whispering something in his native tongue. A prayer or a promise. Evelyn didn't ask which. She just stood beside him, the wind tugging at her hair, both of them framed by the ashes of the past and the first quiet breath of forgiveness. The blood debt had been paid, not in death, but in truth. The wind howled through the canyon like the voices of the dead. The gunfire had stopped. All that remained were the echoes and the acrid taste of smoke drifting through the dying light. Evelyn Marrow pressed her hand to her side where a bullet had grazed her. She stumbled forward, boots slipping on blood-soaked dust. Eyes locked on Tarak, the Apache warrior standing motionless beneath the thunderhead sky. Holly Mercer lay on the ground, his breath shallow, his rifle fallen beside him. The man who had once been Evelyn's salvation was now nothing but another ghost in her long, cursed trail. Tarak turned toward her slowly. The stormlight lit his bronze, muscular body, painted with tribal white markings that now blurred with sweat and blood. His long black hair was loose, whipping around his face, and the bone jewelry at his neck rattled softly like a death rattle. "You could have let him live," Evelyn said, her voice trembling, part rage, part relief. "He would have never stopped," Tarak replied. His tone was quiet, heavy with truth. "You know it as I do." Evelyn's throat tightened. The man she once trusted had betrayed her, framed her for the massacre at Raven Creek, sold her name to bounty hunters, and told the world she'd turned on the natives she'd sworn to protect. Holly had lied, to her and to everyone else, but she couldn't ignore the grief clawing at her chest as she looked down at his still body. "Why did you come back for me?" she whispered. Tarak's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Because you didn't pull the trigger that night," he said. "I saw it. You tried to stop him. You tried to stop all of them." The words cut through her like glass. For years she'd carried the guilt, the screams, the fire, the faces of the dying. But Tarak had been there. He'd seen what she couldn't forgive herself for failing to stop. Rain began to fall, slow, cold drops that turned the dust into dark streaks of mud. Lightning flickered behind the canyon walls. Tarak stepped closer, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. "Raven Creek was burned because of greed," he said. "Not because of you. You were just the one who tried to stand between worlds." Evelyn stared into his eyes. There was no hate there, only a fierce sadness and something else, something older. "Then why do I still feel like one of them?" she asked bitterly. "A killer. A ghost." "Because you are both," Tarak said simply. "But so am I." The storm broke then, rain pouring down hard enough to drown the silence. Evelyn fell to her knees beside the fire pit, trembling. Her revolver slipped from her grasp, landing in the mud. Tarak crouched in front of her, lightning flashing across his skin, highlighting every scar. "Every mark of survival. You still have a chance," he said. "You can leave this land. Start over. And you?" she asked. He gave a faint, wry smile. "My story is written in the sand. The rain will wash it soon." Something broke inside her then, the last wall she'd kept standing between guilt and forgiveness. Without thinking, she reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw. His breath caught, and when their eyes met, the storm outside became a whisper compared to the storm within them. She leaned in and bit his lip, not out of anger, but as if to taste the truth, to prove he was real, alive, and not just another ghost haunting her. Tarak's low chuckle rumbled in his chest. His voice came soft and deep, carrying the wildness of thunder. "I want more bites," he murmured. Evelyn froze, the words burning through the rain-soaked air. For the first time in years, she laughed, a sound that was raw. Broken, but alive. And in that dark canyon, with blood on their hands and rain washing the past away, two lost souls who had been enemies, victims, and survivors finally found something resembling mercy. The storm howled louder, as if the land itself was bearing witness, and beneath its roar, the ghosts of Raven Creek began to rest. The storm broke before sunrise. The desert was silent again, washed clean by the night's fury. The rain had carved small rivers through the canyon floor, carrying away blood, ash, and the last traces of the battle that had cursed this land for years. Evelyn Marrow awoke beside the dying embers of their fire, her coat still damp, her revolver resting near her hand. The sound of a single raven cawing overhead cut through the quiet. She turned and saw Tarak standing at the ridge, his silhouette carved against the first light of dawn. He was bare-chested again, his muscular frame glistening with water, the white tribal paint now washed into faint streaks across his skin. His long black hair moved gently in the wind, beads and bone charms from his tribal jewelry clinking like soft chimes. There was calm in his stillness, but also something final, something that made her chest tighten. "You're leaving," Evelyn said softly. Tarak turned, his eyes shadowed by the rising sun. "I must," he said. "The spirits of Raven Creek are free now." Their cries stopped with the storm. Evelyn rose, brushing mud and ash from her coat. "And what about yours?" she asked. "You're still haunted." Tarak's jaw tightened. "A warrior's spirit doesn't rest. It fades with the wind, becomes part of the land." He paused, glancing toward the distant ridge where Halle Mercer's body lay buried beneath wet earth. "Justice is done. My path ends here." But Evelyn shook her head. "No, it doesn't. You've carried vengeance long enough. Let it go, Tarak. You deserve to live for something else." He studied her for a long moment, the flickering light in his dark eyes reflecting the fire that still burned in her. Then, quietly, he said, "You speak like someone who's found peace." She smiled faintly, a tired, broken smile. "Maybe not peace," she murmured. "Just purpose. There's a difference." A gust of wind swept between them, lifting sand and strands of her wet hair. She stepped closer. The air between them still held the wild tension from the night before, that brief, dangerous moment when blood and desire had blurred into something neither of them could name. "I thought I'd die out here," she said, her voice barely above the wind. "But you showed me I still have a reason to breathe." Tarak reached out, his rough hand brushing the scar beneath her chin. His touch was warm despite the morning chill. "You gave me back my honor," he said quietly. "That's more than life." The first rays of dawn stretched across the canyon, golden and red. Evelyn felt something shift, a peace she hadn't known in years, a lightness that came after the storm. She wanted to ask him to stay, to come with her beyond the desert, to leave the ghosts behind. But when she looked into his eyes, she already knew the answer. Tarak turned to face the horizon where the plains stretched endlessly toward the mountains. "The land remembers everything," he said. "Even mercy. If I stay, the past will follow me." Evelyn's throat ached. "Then at least take this," she said, unfastening her old silver sheriff's badge, dulled by time and dust. She placed it in his hand. "You once called me between two worlds." Maybe this can remind you there's still a bridge between them." Tarak looked down at the badge, the symbol of a world that had once condemned him, now offered as a token of trust. His fingers closed around it, and he nodded once. "Goodbye, Evelyn Marrow," he said. She smiled faintly. "Goodbye, Tarak of Raven Creek." He stepped back, the wind lifting his hair, the sunlight tracing his strong frame, a muscular warrior adorned in tribal jewelry, walking barefoot into the red horizon. Evelyn watched until he disappeared into the mist rising from the desert floor. As if the land itself swallowed him in gratitude, when the last trace of him was gone, she saddled her horse Ash and turned toward the open trail. The sun rose fully behind her, casting her long shadow ahead, a shadow no longer burdened by guilt or ghosts. She whispered to the wind, "We're free now." And somewhere in the distance, carried by the morning air, she thought she heard a single voice, deep, calm, and proud, whisper back, "I want more bites of life this time." Evelyn laughed softly through tears as she rode toward the rising light, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The land was quiet. Raven Creek had finally found peace. And so had she.